people. I am Twism Family. We have not done a stream in a while. We've got like at least a year or two. I have my good friend and soul brother, Rob. Rob, say hello.
Hey, how's it going?
So we are bringing to you today some really, really cool information about Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And as I said before, you probably haven't seen, we probably made our video about a year ago, right, Rob? A year or so? Almost 2 years?
Yeah, it's definitely been a while.
Okay. Yep, so, you know, at that time, there wasn't a lot of information out there, so we kind of had to put ourselves on reserve and wait till we get some good info. And thus, we have excellent info. A lot of info there you might know. Some info might be a little bit of scarce, you know, for you, but we're going to try to make things clear as best as possible. We have some slides that we can show, and we're going to start off with a couple of classes, but we are going to go through all the classes. But today, we're going to go through just a couple, and you know, we'll get into the discussion. Rob, is there anything you want to talk about before we begin?
No, I'd just say like a lot of the information that we got, we kind of pieced together from watching all the various streams, and it's probably just going to be, you know, partially what we've seen and kind of theory crafting as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. All right, so I'm gonna go on in here and let's see, switch the show here, and oh, wait a minute, let me go back one. I gotta add you into. Let's see. Output capture. Okay, make sure you're there with us. All right, so without further ado, we will be getting into it. And our class discussion, part 1, will be about the Cleric and the Shaman. So this is what we know, the Cleric abilities. And of course, the races that are available to the Cleric will be the Dwarf, I think that's the Dark Mirror, and Human. And so, all right. So, Rob, you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, if you read through the rundown here, you can see we've kind of tried to slightly color code some of the things, whereas like the buffs and the heals are going to be these light blue. Some of the debuffs are the purpley pink color. Then you have some of, again, more buffs as well, slightly different, like the light source that we have them in green, and then some damage spells in red. If you kind of go through them and you're familiar with the classic MMO Cleric, you'll see that a lot of it is fairly straightforward. You know, you got a lot of straightforward healing. They're probably going to have the best healing throughput. You know, that was mentioned by Joppa in the Basgrim class discussion they had at PAX East.
Yep.
You know, again, kind of counterbalancing our two classes. We chose them because they have a good amount of info, and they're both healing classes. So we can kind of theory craft on how we feel they will be healing. But again, the Cleric is kind of straightforward. One thing that I do find interesting is that they threw in a pacify in there.
Right, yeah.
Which is the Edict of Stillness. Again, I don't directly remember whether clerics had pacify in EverQuest or not. I can actually look it up real quick. Yep, yeah. Clerics, Paladins. Yep, Clerics, Paladins, and Enchanters had pacify. So again, it kind of goes back to like the roots of, if you remember in EverQuest, Cleric, you're probably going to be quite comfortable and familiar playing this class, it seems, so far.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be less of the rolling in some DPS and more of the healing and making sure there's a little bit of crowd control going on with the pacify.
Yeah, it'll probably help, a lot easier with the pulls having the pacify in there. Again, I don't know how much they've used it in the streams or anything, but it is nice to see that it is there. Again, if you're going back to your traditional MMO roots where it's not, World of Warcraft where you just pull everything and burn it down.
Right, right. And I just want to let everyone know all this information here is definitely subject to change. This is just information that we got viewing the streams via the Hive Leader, Koopa Troopa, Lasses, Jim Lee, Co-Carnage. We took all this data and we're just trying to formulate some abilities for everyone that they can kind of see all in one place. Rob and I thought it was a good idea to do this because we've been looking at the Reddit reviews as well as some other things online, MMORPG, and this info was kind of spread out. It wasn't really all in one place. So as I said before, we're going to do a couple of classes now, and then we'll put something together for each and every class thereafter. But for right now, we've got the starting with the Cleric, and it looks like there's these are pretty good abilities to start off with. I mean, you have a few low-level stuff like a Gift of Ethereal Cloth that increases your allies' armor class by 25 for 36 minutes, and that's something that you would get at level 2. And then you have some of the other abilities, a couple heals. I know there's actually a lower level heal. Let's see, level 5. You get turns you into a weak light source for 24 minutes. We're not sure if that is incorporating a heal with that. I just think that maybe some of the streams, I think it was Chris Chopper Perkins mentioned that the detail level in the dungeon areas, especially in like Black Rose Keep with all of the lighting, there are certainly dark areas. So that could be definitely a really key ability there to use. And I think to in addition to that, if that threw out some healing as well, that'd be kind of cool. Like just some like low, because it is a 24-minute duration. So I'm just thinking like if there's like some low healing, like AOE type healing, that'd be kind of cool. So yeah, Rob, anything else you want to add?
Just bring to mention too that there are a few, we put these slides together. There are probably a few things in there that we didn't fully get. We were working on kind of putting a list together of all the spells. Like, I do know that the clerics have a revive, which is basically when your res, and that gift line. There are more than just the cloth. We just put that one in because it's kind of the starter. It's your classic. Buff, every so many levels you'll get a new one which is a little better and kind of goes along the lines with, again, if you're familiar with EverQuest, where it goes up from cloth to woven to chain to probably plate and so on, so that you'd be able to just distinguish what level they are just by the title alone.
Right, yeah, because it might have some type of graphical like aura to it, right?
Yeah, but again, it's just classic MMO where you get a line of spells. It's going to be one of the ones where you are going to replace it every so often, and not necessarily be one that you're going to keep permanently, because it's not. It's how the games used to be, was that you had to get new spells. They've mentioned in the streams that yes, you're going to have to see trainers. You're going to have your bags full of little scrolls sitting there. So when you level, you memorize them, and then you're not just going to automatically get them, or it's not going to be, say, like the Old Republic where you have a spell from level 1 and it's the same one and it just slowly gets better. You're going to have to acquire new ones. But also, like, throw in as well that the cleric has access to a lot of cures. They have the cure poison, cure disease. So this gonna, kind of be their all around
Yeah.
healing and curing sort of class.
So I have a quick question. Do you think, Rob, that with where it was an EQ, if you had a heal spell and it healed you or an ally, do you think the heals in Pantheon will also damage the undead?
Probably not, given the fact that the ward undeath. You can see they have ward undeath, cull undeath, so
Yeah.
they're probably just going to have a distinct line. So that way, especially having an offensive and defensive target at the same time in this game,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to have a spell that does both, it might not know which way to go. So if
Excuse
you
me.
had your tank targeted who's tanking a skeleton and you cast a spell that damages but heals, it might not know which way. So it's probably just best to separate them.
Right. Right. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. All right. Let's continue. On to this shaman. So just to start off the bat, we've got Gift of the Ancestors, where it increases your wisdom and constitution +2 for 20 minutes at level 1. I think right off the bat, you're stepping into the role of a shaman. I think it's going to be a wonderful thing, this class, because, I really do like the direction that Visionary Realms is going with this. I really love the fact that when you're grouping with someone like, Rob and I mainly group together. We don't necessarily, form parties unless, there's an area that we really need to, or combine with guilds or anything like that. So it's usually just him and myself. And so, he usually chooses a tank or heavy DPS type character. And I usually go with someone with the heals. And right now, the shaman is the one for me. I love to heal. And so I'm very excited about with the shaman. I think it's going to be... I think, Rob, you're going with the Dire Lord, was it, or was it the?
Yeah. Right at the moment, still kind of hoping to get some info on it. But
Right.
back in EverQuest, I like to play the Shadow Knight, so I'm hoping that there's still some carryover. But
Mm.
it's all subject to change based on once we find out info.
Right, right, and I think the big thing for me is because, I think I mentioned to you before off stream, was that, I'm super excited. I'm so excited about the game and to get into play the classes. And although the shaman is my favorite, and I definitely want to jump in, I'd like to play all the classes. But the one thing that's keeping me away from making just a whole bunch of alts and having one as my main is I really want to know more information about the progeny system, where Brad McQuaid has mentioned that once you get to a unsaid level cap or specific level, that where the progeny system kicks in, like it'll basically, whatever alt you make, it's almost like creating a family of alts, that will be more powerful than their predecessors. And so that's like the one thing that stops me from jumping in and just making a whole bunch of alts, so I can kind of get to know every class as I'm going through each area. But shaman will definitely be my first go-to. And although the druid, with their indirect healing, it sounds extremely interesting, but right now the shaman has got me, and that's where I'm going to stay, because some of these a lot of these abilities here, with the heal over time, and the debuffs and the curses, like those are definitely, especially for you and I when we're grouping, it's definitely going to help us, just as a two-man show, get us through a lot of the content, until we get to a point where we just are going to have to say, hey, we need a group of X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's cool. And again, being familiar with EverQuest, it was Shaman was always a good duo partner. You know, the buffs, the slow, which you can see that they do have in here, the Curse of Lethargy. So they do have a slow. And so far, I think it might be the only slow I've seen. I don't know if the Enchanter
Hmm.
in Pantheon is going to have a slow. So it'd be kind of interesting that if so, then the Shaman will be kind of highly sought after. You
Right.
know, unless the Bard, which they have announced is probably going to make launch, um, has that ability as well. And I also like to point out some of these things we mentioned, say like the progeny system or other particular systems, we will eventually talk about in the future once we get through class discussions.
Hmm.
Um, but bringing it back around to the shaman, again, it so far seems to be very um, emulating the EverQuest shaman, where again, you're not going to be throwing out crazy heals, but you will be able to heal and help mitigate a lot of the need to heal
Right.
by using a lot of your debuffs. Again, also with the spells, I'll also throw out the disclaimer that this is not all of the spells that we have seen. This is just some of them to give you a general idea. Um, and it doesn't have every detail because again, we're not familiar. Not to say not familiar. We're not sure what some of the things are going to do. Because if you watch some of the streams like the Koopa Troopa stream, they you can pause it and get the description of these spells where they might say Earth Bane or Earth Boon, which I could only assume at some point um, maybe you develop an affinity for something,
Right. Yeah.
and that particular spell line is better or worse or not sure. Right now, it's all just kind of theory, but I could see it revolving around totems because I believe um, in the class description on the actual PantheonMMO.com website, it mentions the shamans having these affinities. So it could be interesting. You know, I doubt that they would have a special slot, but then again, you never know. You know, in EverQuest, shamans were the only class to access alchemy, so they could potentially have, you know, their own totems totem slot because you can see it says the shaman makes a pact with a totem, a fount of primordial energies. So I could see them, you know, having particular items that might benefit said, you know, earth, maybe fire, water, who knows.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and another thing that we saw too is that's not listed here was in the Koopa Troopa stream that one of the heals was a group heal. So, you know, that helps definitely with a lot of utility where you can kind of just throw up, you know, that lesser regeneration on the group and then toss out that group heal every so often
Yeah.
and not really have to struggle as much as, like, say, a cleric might to heal the entire group. It might not be as mana intensive for you.
Yeah. Because we did see that in the the hive leader. He was, he was healing a lot, for the group, and um, his mana bar was just. I mean, he was definitely managing his mana, but that's pretty much all the cleric was doing. It was throwing out heals, not too much of anything else, and that's okay. That's the way the class is intended to be played, But that's something that the shaman, I truly believe, has a step above, where they're the debuffs, the heals, the wards. So that way, especially when we get on to a PvP shard, or if they let that actually happen where there's a PvP rule set, you know, I'd hate to, because that's the one thing I hate about playing a healer. In PvP you get ganked a lot, this and that. I just like the ability to actually do something. Like I'm not just healing. Like I can just throw up a ward real quick, throw up a heal, and then I can start pounding away. To the point where okay, they're either going to get so frustrated with the fact that they can't kill me right away, or the fight gets drawn out that they just either are going to call friends and I run, or they run via boredom. You know, so it's rather than being just a cleric, I'm just healing, and even if I were to swing my mace at them, it's really not doing too much of a damage.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Excuse me. I hope the Pantheon, Visionary Realms gets to talk more about the skill lines, because right now I know that I'm not sure of the cleric, but I know in the shaman there's the clarity skill line which boosts the natural mana regeneration, and that is the second class that we've heard of that actually does that, because I think it's the enchanter, if I'm not
Yeah, the enchanter had a nuke which would return mana to the group as long as you were within a certain range. But yeah, you mentioned that the shaman, and it was Walk the Ages. It was in one of the streams because the enchanter asked for, oh, you got Walk the Ages, which was interesting that in EverQuest the enchanter was the one with the clarity line, and now it seems like it might switch to the shaman, and it almost seems like the shaman has almost a little bard flair going to it, where it's got a little heals, got some buffs, got some DOTs, got some of this, got some, so it has a little bit of everything. So which makes it interesting to see, in the future, what is the bard gonna look like.
Yeah, very interesting. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and one thing I would point out too is that, and they talked about in that class discussion video, was I kind of noticed they put an emphasis on group content, meaning that they mentioned that all three healers will be able to heal equally in group content. So, I always found it kind of interesting that they directly use that word, because looking through the shaman and seeing it played and even having experience with it in EverQuest is that it could do the job in a group, but once you hit raids you weren't gonna be the main tank healer.
Right
and I think that's probably gonna happen here as well, and some people are fine with that. I know everybody wants everybody to be just as good as everybody else, but sometimes that's just not how it works.
Yeah, unfortunately, But even, I'm glad you mentioned that, because you and we've played MMOs together, and one in particular, SWOTOR, where I was the tank and you were the healer. That's something that we we got not necessarily got in trouble for, but it was something that came up a lot. We tried to get past certain content, and we were trying to get into groups, and it was like, hey, what kind of healer are you? What kind of tank are you? And it's like, okay, well, I'm a, a Sith Inquisitor. So I was like, what was it, a Sith Shadow or a Sith Inquisitor?
Yeah, it was the Inquisitor.
Yeah, Sith Inquisitor. So, I'm tanking as a Sith Inquisitor. Like, oh, yeah, we need a warrior. The Sith Inquisitor is, not so good. And it's like, it's so disappointing to run into things like that. I don't want to, as a healer in Pantheon, I don't want to be like, hey, I'm a shaman, and these are the heals and whatever as I have, and like, no, we want a cleric. It's like, well, dude, I can heal too. You know what I mean? And I'm glad that shamans will at least be group, oriented, and whether or not they may not be raid oriented, is an entirely different matter, or another question for another day. And we'll certainly see that when it comes. But I hope the case will be the latter, whereas I'll, as a shaman, I will be able to handle or have the mechanics put into handle a raid style of healing, whether they split the group or however you do it. I really don't care. I just know that I'm a healer. This is what I can do. Because everyone's going to learn the class. So, healers, it just, it is what it is. But yeah, we'll see. Proof's in the pudding.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about the shaman too, though, is that with the slow and the buffs and stuff, they definitely always have a spot. Even if there is a cleric in the group, you could say, okay, well, fine, I'll just focus on slows and go more DPS route, which is always kind of cool because, say the cleric's got to drop out, then all of a sudden you can take over as the healer. You have a lot of utility in that
Right.
class, so it's probably a class that you're never going to be struggling to find a group, which
Right.
kind of ties into why we always play kind of that tank healer combo, is because those are usually the hardest to find. So if one of
Right.
us is tank, one of us is healer, we can fill up, you know, again,
Healing
most of the
is
games, it's been mostly just filling it up with DPS. Now there's a little bit more because you need the utility classes with crowd control and such. But
healing is a
you know,
thankless job.
yeah, yep,
Yep.
yeah, like you said, and it's tough too when you're going through games where they have particular flavors of the month, and it's like, you're not the healer we want, especially for somebody like me, where I like to play one class and just stick to it.
Right.
So when they rotate all those and like, oh well, you should be this healer, and it's like, well, I don't have that class, or I don't want to play that type of healer. It
Yeah.
can be tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's nice where you go back to a game where you're just a shaman. That's it. You're not the shaman where, say, like you said, like the Old Republic, where you start off as one class, but it splits, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh no, you chose the wrong one. It's
Mm.
like, no, but it's just, this
So,
is how I want to play. I didn't choose the wrong one.
right.
You're just telling me.
So you're telling me that I wasted my $15 for that month, and I should have chosen another class.
Yeah, it's just more about having fun, and
Right.
playing the
Right.
game, and kind of defining your role from the beginning is nice, so you know what you get.
Yep. All right. Cool. Let's see. What's the next slide here? Yeah. So that is the cleric and the shaman, and Rob and I will be making another video for more class abilities and breakdowns for the warrior and the rogue. Next we speak, and we'll get that out as soon as we can. We're compartmentalizing all the information on our spare time, and we hope that you've enjoyed this video and it has brought some light. If not, please leave comments, questions in the description below. Subscribe if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. That's all good. I like the good and I like the bad too. That's how you get better. Rob, you anything you want to finish up with?
Not particularly, just like you said, definitely have more content to come. And then, as we work on what we've been calling our little spell book, we'll probably try to post a link to that in these videos, so that way people can have access to it. And if there's information that you have found that we don't have, feel free to, leave it in the comment, and we'll, add it and give you credit for providing us that information.
Yeah, so it has been a great pleasure, Rob. Thank you for jumping on here with me. And
Not a problem, man.
we will definitely get that information out. And guys, thanks you for getting to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time. See you later.